Hello, human geographers. We are back at it again this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a pivotal era in human history that has had huge numbers of effects. And that's why we're talking about it towards the beginning of the course, so that we can see the effects throughout the course of this school year. Before the Industrial Revolution, goods were built in what was known as the cottage industry, which was manufacturing based in homes rather than in a factory, commonly found prior to the Industrial Revolution. So what was the Industrial Revolution? It was a series of improvements in industrial technology that transformed the process of manufacturing goods. So basically, the cottage industry was when goods were manufactured in the home, often by hand by skilled artisans. The Industrial Revolution shifted manufacturing to factories, which could mass produce goods using machinery. There were two major developments that helped to accelerate the Industrial Revolution. The first was greater access to capital. Capital is the monetary assets that a business possesses. Basically, capital is another term for money or assets that a company can purchase, like raw goods or machinery. Much of the capital at this time was generated by England's dominant position in global trade, as well as from the raw materials that it gathered from its colonies. The second major development involved not one, but a series of technological improvements that helped to raise output. Developments like the steam engine and mechanical loom greatly increased productivity while harnessing new sources of energy. The cottage industry was driven by human power, but the Industrial Revolution began to harness water power. Later, the steam engine was developed and improved to utilize steam by heating it with fossil fuels, specifically coal. Still later, the development of electricity further accelerated changes in manufacturing. The first steps in industrialization occurred in northern England, where cotton from America and India was shipped to the port of Liverpool. Textile factories in the British Midlands, south of Manchester, took advantage of rivers to power cotton spinning machines. So initially, manufacturing was largely rural and spread out or dispersed. In Britain, as time progressed, areas around the coal fields became more densely populated and more highly urbanized as people moved there looking for work. The coal, cotton, and textile plants were clustered together, helping the Liverpool, Manchester, and Leeds region become the center of mechanized textile manufacturing during the Industrial Revolution. The invention of the steam engine provided a better source of power and allowed factories to move away from water-based power. The invention of railroads lowered the cost of transporting bulky and heavy items. Companies could then locate their manufacturing plants away from the coal and iron ore deposits and move towards major cities like London, as well as Paris later on. Cities were more suitable for companies because they could draw from a larger labor pool and sell the goods to a larger population of consumers. London was especially attractive because of its site on the Thames River and its situation in the flow of regional and global capital. All of these circumstances caused an explosion in urban populations everywhere that industrialization occurred. As cities grew, Old systems for handling human waste, the burying of the dead, and cleaning up horse manure were overwhelmed. Air pollution increased to harmful, even deadly levels. So while in the long term, the death rate declined due to improvements in sanitation, inventions of things like soap, and the developments of new medicines, in the short term, death rates actually went up due to the high levels of pollution and the dangers of factory life. Countries undergoing industrialization sought out more numerous colonies because raw materials like sugar, cotton, foodstuffs, lumber, and minerals were needed in mills and factories. Colonies also provided abundant labor to extract raw materials while also serving as a larger market to sell manufactured goods to. Oftentimes, colonial cities were established on the coasts to build ports for shipping goods in and out. As a historical example, the monarchies of both the Netherlands and England eventually stepped in and directly colonized Indonesia and South Asia respectively, in an effort to attempt to stabilize the Dutch and British East India companies, and to secure the continued flow of wealth to their countries in Europe. So while the hearth of the Industrial Revolution was the British Isles, specifically northwest England, it quickly diffused to mainland Europe. Specifically, it spread to areas with the same set of locational criteria for industrial zones. Sites needed to be close to resources and connected to ports by water. So continental Europe felt the impact first. But notice the impact of distance decay in terms of how long it took to diffuse technological improvements. Essentially, the global diffusion of the Industrial Revolution has occurred slowly and in three broad phases. During the first phase, which ran from roughly 1760 to about 1880, the Industrial Revolution diffused to Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and Germany in Europe, as well as the United States. As transportation systems improved, traditional wooden sailing ships gave way to steel ships powered by steam engines, and later railroads became more prevalent. The United States began rapid adoption of railroads around 1850. And a half century later, Japan became the first major non-Western country to undergo full industrialization. And this was part of the second phase, spanning the years 1880 to around 1950, where the Industrial Revolution diffused to Russia, Japan, and Canada, among other places, especially British colonies or former colonies. During this time, some industrial centers emerged in places that were still predominantly agricultural, like Shanghai, China, what was then called Bombay in India, Monterrey in Mexico, and Sao Paulo in Brazil. The third phase, which began in the 1950s and is still underway, has seen the continued industrialization of countries affected by phase two and the industrialization of countries throughout Asia, specifically in East, South, and Southeast Asia. As countries industrialized, we saw improvements in things like agricultural output. It's not pure luck that the second agricultural revolution coincided with the Industrial Revolution. Improvements in crop rotation and animal breeding, along with the developments of new agricultural technologies like the mechanical reaper and the seed drill, made farming more efficient, and farmers were able to produce more food. In fact, during the Second Agricultural Revolution and Industrial Revolution, the agricultural output of England increased 3.5 times, leading to an abundance of food. And while the industrialization of agriculture led to an abundance of food, it also led to many workers losing their farming jobs in rural areas. As a result, many families moved to cities in what is known as the Second Urban Revolution. So we can add urbanization as part of this flow chart. And let's go further. There were also advancements in science and medicine and improvements in sanitation, which caused the population of the Earth to hit 1 billion people for the first time in human history. To be clear, during all of human history until about 1800, the population of the planet had been below 1 billion. But in the roughly 200 years since, we've gone from 1 billion to almost 8 billion, and we're continuing to grow. With increased population numbers, we saw increased consumption, which increased demand and ultimately saw factories develop new techniques to meet that demand. So the practices of the Industrial Revolution created a feedback loop to continually get faster. And we'll examine the details of this when we come back together. Have a good evening, everyone, and I'll see you back in class.